good morning. Really happy to be here for day 2 of OCX. And indeed, very also thankful for the invitation, because you may or may not know, but open source is really special for the European institutions. In Europe, we don't have really big giants in terms of technologies, but we have great communities. We have great interactions between smaller entities that work together on the basis of standards and on the basis of open source. So really, this is at the heart of who we are in Europe. We believe also in the values that you find in open source very often, which is about sharing, which is about transparency, which is about being honest about what you are trying to achieve. So in that context, indeed, we have big ambitions also for open source, and I'm especially grateful for the invitation today by Eclipse, because this is one of the foundations that decided to choose Europe. And that's also very much today one of our objectives, to make this continent the best place to do technology, the best place to develop code that you can indeed develop and use in many, many applications, from industrial applications to indeed open source AI. So today I wanted to flag a few elements in terms of our policies so that you see that indeed it's good to choose Europe, but it's also good to get involved in our activities. First of all, you may or may not know this, but we have been trying to fund open source communities and efforts over the past 10 years. We are preparing, or in fact about to publish in a few weeks' time, at the end of May, an open source strategy, as was just explained. This is part of our tech sovereignty package, so really the attempt to increase and improve the way, as Europeans, we look at our capabilities and how we can reinforce them. But this means indeed public funding as a starting point to nurture who we are in terms of these R&D open source communities. And with my team, we made the calculations in terms of all the research that had some open source elements in terms of the deliverables. And we found that we spend actually, in terms of public funding from the EU budget, about 800 million euros in the past 6 years. So it's actually quite a substantial element. A lot of this went into the projects we call Next Generation Internet, where we actually supported, through smaller amounts, individuals, small partners, so that they can really develop their activities and contribute to communities. But we also have bigger elements. One of them, and I think Eclipse is very much involved, is also on software-defined vehicles, for instance, where the EU is also supporting there. We just created an association. It's called ECAVA, for Connected and Automated Driving. And we really are putting our efforts there, also working with Eclipse to develop this somehow the operating system for the cars that we need to bridge them to the next generation and to the next innovations. And again, working with Eclipse is for us a winning element, because we find the communities, we find also in Europe the industry, we find the expertise, and we think that this is really building a very interesting mix, and hopefully very soon we will have breakthroughs and cars using this technology. But also, as you may know, that through our regulation, we have been promoting open source. One key example is the Cyber Resilience Act. It's about making all our products more secure, because you look also at the software component. And we gave a special place to open source in that context, so that really you use the transparency of open source to make software more secure. And here as well, I think Eclipse is having an important role, is organizing the communities, making sure that we use foundations to also steer and make these technologies robust and cyber secure. But we have many more areas where we want open source to strive and to be an asset for our industry, for our communities, for our technology providers. Data is one example. We are trying to build a lot of data spaces around Europe. And in my team, we are currently funding a technology, a software, a middleware called Simple, that is precisely trying to use open source to organize the sharing of data in a trustworthy manner, and trying also to develop solutions so that you can use data in a decentralized manner, but actually to share and build very interesting innovation on top. So if you don't know about it, have a look, because it's getting really more and more versatile. And with these simple solutions, I'm sure you can innovate on top and build a lot of interesting innovation. Now, in the area of AI, of course, this is a key area also for the EU. Again, we don't have maybe the hyperscalers, the giants, but through the various entities we have in Europe around AI, we are developing very interesting code. And I would really invite you also to look at some of the elements in the AI Act, which again gives open source a special treatment, a special flexibility to develop these solutions. Another area where indeed we want vibrant open source ecosystems to strive. But let me give you a little bit of a preview in terms of what we will announce in our open source strategy. It was quite an interesting journey because we published earlier this year an invitation to get comments. It was incredibly popular. We got more than 1,600 contributions in less than 1 month, showing really the appetite for the open source communities to get recognition, but also to pass very clear message. They need support to make open source not only a short-term gain, but actually a real alternative. And that means sustaining the software. That means having resources also to make it secure over time. That's something we hear, and we want to have a special facility to that purpose, not just nurturing the code, but actually nurturing it over time in a real duration. A second key element was also to recognize open source as a source also of security and sovereignty. Why is it so? Because today you may say there is a lot happening in technology. Why is it that open source could be so helpful? It's very simple. It's that it can help you to leapfrog. In the case of Europe, we miss certain building blocks in our sovereignty, in our tech stack. We want to use open source to leapfrog, to gain access to the technologies we don't have. And this is really, we think, the strength also of our continent. Pool efforts together, even if we are individually smaller, if we bring the communities, we have actually the best possible technology in a joined-up manner. So that was a second very strong message. Look at open source as a way to build sovereignty. And in that context, we also plan, as a result in the strategy, to identify where we are today, because today there are already open source solutions that are valid, that are available, and that we should simply use more. So we will also pay attention to that, but we also want to make sure that we identify the gaps and where open source can be the way to cover our dependencies. A third element was also to recognize that the public sector can do more in terms of adopting and using open source. That's something that today is happening. Here and there you see municipalities saying, enough with Microsoft or with Amazon, I want to go more for some open source solutions. It's happening locally, and we have great examples of cities, from Lyon to in France to in Denmark, Aarhus, to cities in Germany or in Eastern Europe, even in Greece, showing that this can be done. But what we want is to scale up these experimentations, because it's nice to do it locally. It's even better to do it on a continental basis. So what we will do is actually to help governments to make their procurement open source friendly, give them guidance. But we want actually to go beyond this. We want to have in the Cloud and AI Development Act, which will be also a major piece in our sovereignty package. We want to have this, I wouldn't say an obligation, but almost an obligation to say open money, open source, which means that really whenever the government is paying to develop some software, and it's happening with billions of euros, really, this is a lot of our public spending. We invest in developing software. What we want is that each time this is happening, the software should be open source, so that someone else can reuse it, someone else can learn from it. So that's something that we want to push. Open money, open source, so to say. And that's really, we think, an objective that will be hopefully a game changer also in terms of giving customers to the open source communities, not just attention, but actually a business and a market to conquer. In that context, we need you. We need really the communities to take this opportunity seriously, and we need also open source to be taken seriously. I mean, we had a very interesting experimentation last week. You may have seen the Commission have this, launch a beta app, to have age verification. That's something very important for many of our governments, so that they can verify that, the kids don't go to the wrong places and to protect them overall online. Very important for families, for governments alike. So we have put out this age verification app, and it's open source. And guess what? The idea was precisely this, to test it out. And the press, was very quick in picking that some hackers had identified flaws. But then we explained that's the whole point, That's what you do when you go open, is that you put it in front of the communities and you make sure that, through the collective effort, we get to a better product, we improve, and we have all the flaws looked at. And I think that was a very interesting educational message, because we were attacked very much saying, this is not serious, your product is not perfect. And I think that the second day when we explain how it works, people recognize that this is also the nature of open source, using communities to make the software better, resilient, and cyber secure. So we will come back very soon with, the age verification was what we call the mini wallet, just an attempt to have a limited element. But we see a big opportunity in Europe with the European identity wallet. This is really an identity mechanism. It will be also open source. And what we really aim for is a little bit what India has achieved with something very similar with Aadhaar, to build around the identification a lot of applications, from actually taxi app, to things that are used in many areas of everyday life. They use this identity mechanism to build on top and to use the internet to have a lot of innovation. That's what we aim for with this EID wallet. And really, it's open source, and it is something that you can play with as much as you want. So to conclude, again, thanks for Eclipse, for being here, for being in Europe, and for doing great stuff. Thanks to all of you for participating in these exchanges. There are a few projects displayed that actually are benefiting also from EU funding, in terms of smart cities and these kind of things you can see around you. There are things around software-defined vehicles, so stay tuned and get in touch with also our activities, because there is a lot of opportunities for open source in what the European Commission is doing. But by and large, I think that it's a great momentum now for open source. Open source is getting the recognition it deserves. It's getting really the top-level attention. I can tell you I was in Berlin a few weeks ago at this Tech Sovereignty Summit. Open source was front line, really. So it's a momentum today. It's time to seize the momentum, and it's time to show that through open source, you can not only invent great code, you can actually have products and solutions that are competitive, durable, and that can be really making a big difference for Europe and beyond. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.